Hey everybody, welcome to the Fallout Shelter. I've got some information that I'm going to share with you today that you can give to your unbelieving friends that don't believe that weather modification is being done and has been done for a fairly long time. First, I want to share with you the government regulations for the reporting on weather modification from govtregs.com regulations. This is from Title 15, Chapter 9, Part 908. I'm going to go through a couple of sections, and if you want to read the whole thing, I'll leave a link in the description. Definitions. Administrator. The administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Person, any individual, corporation, company, association, firm, partnership, society, joint stock company, any state or local government or any agency thereof, or any other organization, whether commercial or nonprofit, except where acting solely as an employee, agent, or independent contractor of the federal government. Weather modification activity. Any activity performed with the intention of producing artificial changes in the composition, behavior, or dynamics of the atmosphere. United States, the several states, the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and any territory or insular possession of the United States. Persons whose activities relate to weather modification. Persons engaged in weather modification, or engaged in the distribution or sale of weather modification apparatus or materials known by them to be destined for use in weather modification activities. Project, a related series of weather modification activities having a common objective. Target area, the ground area within which the effects of weather modification activity are expected to be found. Control area, a pre-selected, untreated ground area used for comparison with a target area. Weather modification apparatus, any apparatus used with the intention of producing artificial changes in the composition, behavior, or dynamics of the atmosphere, for example, seeding generators, propane devices, flares, rockets, artillery, projectiles, jet engines, etc. Sponsor, the primary person for whom the weather modification activity is performed. Operator, the person who is primarily responsible for carrying out the weather modification activity. This was June 10th, 1976, as amended at 46 FR 32233, June 22nd, 1981. Person engaged or intending to engage in any weather modification activity in the United States shall be subject to the reporting provisions of this part. Let's see. The following, when conducted as weather modification activities, shall be subject to reporting. Seeding or dispersing of any substance into clouds or fog to alter drop size distribution, produce ice crystals or coagulation of droplets, alter the development of hail or lightning, or influence in any way the natural development cycle of clouds of their environment. Using fires or heat sources to influence convective circulation or to evaporate fog, modifying the solar radiation exchange of the earth or clouds through the release of gases, dust, liquids, or aerosols into the atmosphere, modifying the characteristics of land or water surfaces by dusting or treating with powders, liquid sprays, dyes, or other materials, releasing electrically charged or radioactive particles or ions into the atmosphere, applying shock waves, sonic energy sources, or other explosive or acoustic sources to the atmosphere, using aircraft propeller downwash, jet wash, or other sources of artificial wind generation, or using lasers or other sources of electromagnetic radiation. In addition to the activities listed above, other similar activities falling within the definition of weather modification as set forth in 908.1 are also subject to reporting. The requirement for reporting shall not apply to activities of a purely local nature that can reasonably be expected not to modify the weather outside of the area of operation. This exception is presently restricted to the use of lightning deflection or static discharge devices in aircraft, boats, or buildings, and to the use of small heat sources, fans, fogging devices, aircraft downwash, or sprays to prevent the occurrence of frost in tracts or fields planted with crops susceptible to frost or freeze damage. Also expected from the requirements for reporting are religious activities or other ceremonies, rites, and rituals intended to modify the weather. Yeah, I don't really understand why we have to have that in our laws and regulations, but we do. All activities noted in paragraphs A and B of this section are subject to initial reporting. However, after the administrator has received initial notification of a planned activity, he may waive some of the subsequent reporting requirements. This decision to waive certain reporting requirements will be based on the general acceptability from a technical or scientific viewpoint of the apparatus and techniques to be used. Other reporting exceptions may be made in the future by rule of the administrator. Okay, now I'm going to kind of just breeze through some of this, not word for word. I'm going to leave a link if you want to go read it all for yourself. Any person intending to engage in weather modification project or activity in the United States shall provide a report of his intention to be received by the administrator at least 10 days before the commencement of such project or activity. This report shall contain at least the following: the designation, if any, used by the operator for the project or activity. You got to have the date it's going to start, the final day it's going to occur. You want the sponsor, the operator, the purpose, the maps, the description of what you're going to use, how much of it you're going to use, the name and address of the responsible individual from whom the logbooks or other records of the project may be obtained. You have to answer all of the normal safety questions, environmental questions. That's typical in government work. The contracts, interim reports. Here we go. Let's get to some of the interesting stuff. Let's see, you have to have the number of days which the actual modification took place. You have to have the number of days which the activities were conducted, segregated by each of the major purposes. Total number of hours of operation of each type of weather modification apparatus. Net hours of agent release. Total amount of agent used. If more than one agent was used, each should be totaled separately. Examples given: carbon dioxide, sodium chloride, urea, and silver iodide. They would not have listed those four in the regulations if they did not know it was already being used on a regular basis at that time. June 22nd, 1981. You come down and you have the information for the interim report. Really, you get down to the same thing over and over for the reports now. If you want to read every bit of this about the reporting of the weather modification, I'm going to leave a link below. Now, for our Canadian brothers and sisters, here is the Canadian from the Justice Laws website. What's it say? Okay. Date of notice. Schedule 1. I don't know what I'm on. I should be on the... Let me go to the table of contents. Somehow I got off of it. There we go. These regulations may be cited as the Weather Modification Information Regulations. In these regulations, ACT means the Weather Modification Act. Weather modifier means any person who engages in weather modification activity. This is... I didn't have the top up there. Regulations prescribing the registration and provision of information respecting weather modification activities within Canada and Canadian waters. The information specified in Schedule 1 is hereby prescribed for the purposes of subsection 3(1) of the Act. And I would probably have to go find these acts and stuff the way this is written. A daily record of weather modification activity maintained pursuant to paragraph 4(1)(a) of the Act shall be maintained in the form and manner set out in Schedule 2. A report to be submitted to the administrator pursuant to paragraph 4(1)(a) of the Act shall be submitted in the form and manner set out in Schedule 3, subject to such modifications as may be necessary in order for the form to contain any information or observation specified by the administrator. Remember, in this law, anytime you hear of the Act, it means the Weather Modification Act. They do that so when people are scanning through these laws, they don't see the word weather modification over and over and over together. That's my opinion on that. Let's look through a page or two on here. Let's see. General identification. It's basically the same as what's on the United States. It's date of notice, province and general area, proposed activities or operations, the duration, elements to be affected, results expected, class of operation. You got all of the stuff about the people who are in charge. Lists up to 5 similar weather modification activities clearly identified undertaken by an organization in Canada and elsewhere. So this is another methods to be used, general principle or techniques to effect modification, brief description of specific technique, if the weather modifier considers himself to hold proprietary rights, any patents held, equipment to effect modification. Yeah, I would suggest if you're into this stuff and you want to read this word for word, let's see, however, toxic, corrosive, or other harmful effects of any of these materials, however minor, where specifically known, indicating any known references or any test performed otherwise, an assessment of any possible harmful effects. The modifier should assure himself that there are no violations of the Clean Air Act or other legislation, and provision of information under this schedule does not signify approval or compliance with any other legislation. Aircraft or airborne equipment. You have to have the certified license. That's all normal. Numbers of the powered vehicles. Measuring. Observation. Yeah, this is all very, very interesting. I think I'm going to call that done right here. That's enough. I'll post the links to these two in the description. So I hope this helps. I've actually had some people, when they see some of these things, at least acknowledge that there are certain things as weather modification, and maybe it helps to educate. And it's really not about how smart you are, it's about how informed you are. So I'm just trying to spread this information. So if you enjoy this, please subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff that I don't really totally understand yet. And God bless you and have a great day.